Here we're going to SMD solder this tiny USB hub. We're going to use the hot air station and solder paste. So we have all the different parts laid out on the bench. Here we are going to use this stick vise to keep the PCB from moving. Now that we've got that in place, I'm going to add some flux using my flux pen to the pads of the main IC. Now we're going to take out the main IC, just get it down on the PCB, and then use the tweezers to position it on the pads correctly. Then we are going to tack it down in the corners using the soldering iron. We're just going to do that on opposite corners of the device. Make sure it's not going to go anywhere. We have it in a position that we like. Where give it a quick little nudge, make sure it's not going anywhere. Now we're going to apply the solder paste. We're going to try and make a thin line going across all the pads. Probably used a little too much there, but that's okay. We can always remove it afterward. Now we're going to heat the solder paste till it melts, till it flows onto the pins. Now we see here we have a lot of solder bridges, so we're going to need to go and clean that up. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my soldering iron and try and pull the excess solder away. Now this works for some of the pins, but we always have those stubborn ones. So now we can use some desoldering wick to try and wick away that excess solder. Alright, that's a little bit better. Try and remove a little bit of excess off that one of those middle pins. Now that that's done, we can inspect it, try and see if make sure there's no other bridges in there. There's a couple little solder balls, so I'm going to use my tweezers to kind of scrape those out. Now we're going to flip around to the other side and do basically the same thing. Another thin line of solder paste across all the pins. Again, probably using too much here, but applying a thin amount is quite a difficult challenge. So we're going to heat up the paste again with the hot air gun. Melt it all along those pins. Alright, so we have looking pretty good, but again, we have some excess, so we're going to try and pull. Oh, it's moving a little too much, so let's give it a second. Alright, now we're going to do what we did before, try and pull away some of that excess solder. And then we're going to make a mess of it. So there's quite a lot of excess that was hidden in there. So now we're going to use the desoldering braid to try and remove that excess. There we go. A little bit left. Try and get that to wick into the desoldering wick. Being a little stubborn, I see. Okay, that's looking pretty good, but we still have a couple pins with some excess. As you can see here when we do our inspection. So I'm just going to try and use the soldering iron again to try and just pull some of that excess away from that pin. Alright, that's looking a lot better. Alright, now we're going to apply solder paste to the capacitor pads. We only need a tiny amount. These are pretty small components. I'm going to place them with the tweezers again, making sure they're centered. Alright, now with the components placed, we can use the hot air. We're going to turn this down pretty low speed so that we don't blow the components out of place while we're heating them. Alright, so now we're just going to inspect those solder joints to make sure that they are secured, that there's no solder bridges. Now we can place apply solder paste to the resistor pads. This is a even smaller component. Have a little too much solder on there, but we'll be able to fix that later. Now here with the hot air, the reflow starts pretty good, but the part gets blown out of place, and I wasn't able to fix it with just the tweezers, so I repositioned the part as best as I could and heated up the solder once again. Now I'm going to use both the tweezers and the hot air to just nudge that right into place. Now that it's all done, we're going to put this underneath the microscope and we can inspect the pins at a little closer up. You can see the resistor right there. Doesn't look like it's quite soldered very well, so we're going to try and fix that. We're going to take a look at the capacitors. They look pretty good, so we're not going to worry about those. As for the resistor, I'm going to hold it down with the tweezers and just come in with the tip of my soldering iron and just make sure that that solder is connected to the SMD resistor. Okay, there we go. All we need to do is place the through-hole components, which is just a crystal oscillator, and then we're done. Thanks for watching.